This video is going to be about pattern operations. The number one issue I see with students when it comes to pattern operations is being able to find initial. So I have some techniques for doing that. The first technique is going to be making sure that as soon as you determine your landing runway, that you put that course in your CDI. So let's just say we're landing runway 10 at Evergreen. We will immediately just put 100 into that course needle, and that will give us a reference for what heading we should be when we are at initial. Okay, so when we are at the actual initial point, that CDI needs to be right at the top of the heading that we are flying. Okay. Additionally, use your nav display. Alright, get that nav display up. It'll have the little targets for all the different fields. So G, Z, H, let's say, is over here. Okay, so we're flying this way, and let's just use this. So we know GZH is off to our right some, and that we are flying, if that's 10, 0, then we're flying about north, right? So we're flying about north. GZH is off to our right. We'll have, range. So cool, let's just say that's 5 miles. So then in that case, we'll know that we're right over here somewhere, okay? And we can orient or position ourselves, fly appropriately so that we can get onto the initial point. Additionally, I teach that you should imagine a 5-mile and 5,000 foot high iron dome around the airfield. Okay, you do not want to penetrate this in any way, shape, or form until you are at the initial point. Okay, so what that means, or until you are lined up on initial, is that you'll end up flying a 5 or 6 mile initial. And I like teaching that because we need what? We need an ATIS, airspeed, altitude, and angle, right? So if we're out here at 5, 6 miles, that gives us, hopefully we have ATIS, right? That should be a given. Airspeed. If we're off airspeed, it gives us a little time to correct it. Altitude, same thing. Angle, if we're coming in from 6 miles, 5 miles, we don't have to worry about being outside of that 45 degrees, right? We're going to just be in it just because we'll be aligned back out there. Okay, so let's say we're over here, okay, and you want to go to initial. Don't fly a straight line. Go around the bubble, fly to initial, and then come in. Same thing if we're over here. In this case, I'd recommend being above your 5,000 feet, so in your transition layer here, coming across, descending, obviously clearing the Fox as well. And sending in. Same thing, either go around or get above the 5,000 feet for your transition over to that. Okay, once you've found initial, we're going to come in, and another thing that I will want you to do is to check your winds. So you'll have like a 5, whatever it is, as you are flying up initial. It'll just be right over there on your nav display, okay? And that'll give you an idea of if the winds are going to be overshooting or undershooting while you're coming up initial before you are actually in the pattern and trying to get your displacement there. So if the winds are overshooting while you're coming up initial, maybe you want to shallow out that turn some, get a little bit wider, and if they're undershooting, maybe keep it just a little bit tighter, and that just gives you a heads up a little bit in advance. Additionally, I'm going to want you calling out all the traffic and your interval on when you're coming up initial. So, so let's say you are 1 for 4. I want you to be like, okay, there's that guy, that guy, that guy, and there's my interval traffic. Okay, so I'll want you to state all of that. All right, then coming up into the pattern, remember you're going to want to be your 1/4 wingtip displacement. Call the RDO, red knight 1, 2, 3, crosswind brake, clears you to brake, you brake, descend on the downwind, and then we are in the pattern operations. Okay, so big things if we have to discontinue, and we will make sure that we do so safely. Okay, so if by 2 miles we haven't been acknowledged by the RDO, we'll discontinue. If there's someone who calls high key when we're between 4 miles and 2 miles, we'll discontinue. If we're lined up for the wrong runway, we'll discontinue. If the RDO tells us to discontinue, we'll discontinue. So we're going to turn off at least 45, or at least 90 degrees away, and then we're just going to maintain brake altitude and come back around for another pass. If we're inside that 2 miles and we have to discontinue, we're going to just do it just like we're departing the pattern. So fly the upwind, number 1 upwind, we'll depart 45 degrees off, and then we will come back around. Okay, so nothing terribly cosmic with that. I'm also a big fan of finding ground reference points. I'm going to switch to runway 19 here just because I have more area to work with. So if you find, this little point and decide that's a good downwind, or this little thing, use those ground reference points as targets to fly over, to fly a smooth pattern. Let's say you found this and you found that it overshot you, okay? Well, then on your next pass, you come around and you just widen out a little. Maybe use these, or maybe just say, I'm going to be a quarter wingtip outside of this point I was using before. But make sure that you are using those reference points, okay? Additionally, trim. Trim is going to be your biggest ally in the traffic pattern. Trim will help you control your airspeed much, much better than you would be able to do trying to fight the stick the whole time. So I highly encourage you, trim on the downwind. Once you are at the 180 and you're starting your turn, retrim for your new airspeed. On final, retrim again for your final approach airspeed. And then on your touch and go, you're going to need to trim that nose back down some, okay? Additionally, I teach 2 techniques, one at the 180. Well, I teach a whole bunch of techniques, but 2 specific ones I'm going to talk about here. At the 180, power, pitch, trim, turn, talk. Okay, so reduce your power, set your pitch attitude to what you want, or what you need. Trim for your new airspeed, start your turn, and then talk. 1, 2, 3, 180 gear down. Then the other technique I teach is when we are in the groove coming in up to the flare, and it's power, level, idle, flare. Okay, so what you're going to want to do here as you're crossing the threshold, continue driving that nose down and start reducing the power towards idle. It's going to be one continuous movement towards idle, but this is going to be starting with a slow reduction. Then you're going to just level off over the runway. So you're coming down, you're going to level off. Just try to fly down the runway, just nice and level. Okay, as you bring the power to idle, and then you'll raise the nose slightly to that takeoff attitude and flare, and just allow the aircraft to just settle down onto the runway as you execute that flare. Okay. Other things to worry about: 6 aircraft in the pattern is the limit. That's a lot of aircraft. Okay. If ever we're at the 180 and someone calls that they are at low key, they have priority. Okay, they're going to be flying. See how we are coming out, coming out and flying that pattern? Their 180 pattern is going to be much tighter, okay, like that. Or I'm sorry, their low key is going to be much tighter like that. They have the priority, so we will execute a wave off if someone's ever at low key while we're inside the 180. Additionally, our wave off is going to be to our side of the runway. You don't want to cross to their side of the runway. I hope you can see right here how that can become a potential conflict with aircraft crossing. So we're going to stay on our side of the runway, just execute our wave off and go back around for another pass. That's all the big things that I have for pattern operations. Let me know if you have any additional questions.